additions and or corrections?
No, sir.
Entertain a motion to
I
accept.
make
the
a
bills.
motion to accept as
Second.
offered.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Treasurer's report?
Treasurer's report starts on page 6 of our package. You can see our year-to-date total of revenues of just over $1 million. We're probably a little bit better. We're 10 months into the year, and we're probably a little bit better as far as revenues are concerned coming in. And that's because we had some grant money, primarily that we hadn't had budgeted for, because we have expenses on the other side that's will offset that. So under expenses, everything looks pretty much in line. You can see where there's a few things, and again, those are the where we're over budgets, where we had and the grant money we hadn't planned on having. But our revenues, our expenses are also pretty much within budget at this point. We're showing income over expenditures of $164,000. We break out the ag program expenses, and you can see again that we are probably pretty close to within budget here. And same with the marketing. Seem to be doing pretty well as far as budgeting is concerned, and the same for the manufacturing expenses.
So based on the current spend rate and current income rate, it'll stay positive as
Yeah,
I make
yeah.
money.
Yeah, we should be, we should make a little bit
Over
more.
allocated.
We should have excess revenues over expenditures.
Yes, couldn't think of the right word.
We have to pay for the board trip to the Bahamas, so I'm trying to, solve it.
I'm sure we get a package deal.
We should cut back on flight clothes instead
Oh,
of.
Actually,
why didn't
We're not
I
being
think
quite-
that?
This is the warmest spot on the planet. We've already determined that. Why go to the Bahamas? Stay in Jefferson County.
You got a point.
I appreciate the bonus since I have to put
Yes.
my wedding on this weekend.
Somebody's paying a lot of money out this weekend, that's.
Yeah.
Looking at our position, we have money in our revolving loan funds. Total assets, 4.7 million. Oops, do that. We don't have much for expenses. Mostly it's our deferred income that we have in there. So our capital is 4.6 million. Age receivables, those are our loan receivables basically, so everything's fine there. And what else we got here? Cash receipts, I reviewed them and I didn't see anything out of line there. We reviewed them last night. Check register, same thing. Everything looks pretty much in line. The biggest part of this is payrolls, but everything else looks okay too. What else we got? I guess that's it.
Within the balance sheet, these funds, and I know we're not in the JCIDA meeting, but they're not as cash rich.
JCID is not as cash.
Yeah,
rich
so
as the
what I was getting
LDCs.
at is, knowing that the airport is trying to continue to be developed, these funds are not ever to be touched or repurposed or
No, they
brought
can't.
into.
They can,
They can be.
yes.
And that may be necessary.
Yeah.
Just left pocket, right pocket.
Yeah, all for the community good.
Well, it's Jefferson County in front of both of the agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and may be an issue. Talk about that when we get to the other one.
I just didn't know if it was allowed by the bylaws of the
That's where
LDC or.
the money in the LDC came from, the idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like, yeah, daddy pays
Yeah, yeah.
the kids, and
Depends on
the kids have a bigger bank
where
account
revenue
than
comes
daddy
from
right
and
now.
You're saying daddy's hurting.
Any questions with regards to the treasurer's report.
Make a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries? Well, we're cooking this meeting right along. At this time, I'd like to welcome, Jim Wright, Michelle Capone from the Development Authority. Well, I'm sure everyone knows Jim. Does everyone know Michelle?
We think Michelle is better known, frankly. She hands the money out.
Okay.
Ooh. And forget what I said about the steak dinner, it's coming.
I guess basically we haven't gotten together in quite a while, and we just wanted to touch base on some of the community projects going on, and what's both our organizations can do to better the community. What our ideas were.
Well, you remember last board meeting and the meeting prior to that, we began reaching out to various folks in the community who have major influence. Rich, for example, did an excellent report on hospitals, and so what we're trying to do, again, your advice to me is to reach back into the community and start a better dialogue, and I would say that our dialogue is actually quite good with the Development Authority. Michelle and our crew work extensively on a number of loan programs and other activities, and we're constantly on the hunt for finding ways to better use our resources. But the Development Authority has a more regional approach, and I think, from that perspective, there may be things that we may be able to do to help, or for example, one thing we're working on right now is the rail issue. We've got a tri-county matter that we're working on, and so Carrie Tuttle has become one of the go-to people on that project. We're working with Carrie in a variety of different ways, so it's always good to have Jim up. He has a perspective that frankly none of us have been able to capture over those years, so I thought maybe we'd just chew the fat here. There's nothing formal about it. And your thoughts about what we're doing, Jim? Are we okay? Your thoughts we should be doing some other stuff, or how do we make this thing better?
Well, as a proponent of Trump reform, you'd be surprised if I didn't advocate radical change. How's that for an opening line?
Are you building a fence? Are you building a fence along
If
the
it creates
Canadian
jobs,
border?
yes, I will build the fence. We'll build the block here, we'll ship them, we'll do whatever it takes to create jobs. That aside, thank you. Those of you who don't know Michelle's role, Michelle is the Director of Regional Development for the Authority. So she's involved in programs in, all three counties. She also leads the loan fund effort. Michelle is our lead underwriter. She has others who work with her and for her now. But, and that's a growing role that we have assumed also of late, adding a community planning capability to our loan making. So collectively, you put it all together, and I'll let Michelle speak to it, but she has an extensive portfolio of opportunities where we can assist businesses with financing. We have been successful on several occasions over the last 4 years with the Regional Council, the State Regional Council, secured various loan funds that we utilize for redevelopment purposes. By virtue of the experience over time with administering loans in the region and the fact that we have a state and regional presence, we have been called upon by the Power Authority to administer their loan funds. So for example, when St. Lawrence, New York State, and the Power Authority, Alcoa and the Power Authority reached an agreement on their $10 million loan fund, we were asked to administer that fund on their behalf for the region. So that's our place. As that role has expanded, Michelle has also juggled some housing interests. More and more of that has drifted to Matt, other than the financing component. So that has continued to round out her portfolio. The balance of the authority really goes back to its origins, and the mission of the authority was to address common interests of the three-county region, with a special recognition of where Fort Drum would fit into that mix. So as time has evolved, that role has continued to expand to fill voids that have occurred within the region. So originally it started out dealing with infrastructure, and you saw the projects for Fort Drum, water, sewer between the city and Drum, and in turn the development of the regional solid waste facility. So 30 years later, we're still doing those core services, although they have all expanded significantly over the 30-year time, in terms of there are multiple outside users on those lines, that local governments are benefiting from the investment in the infrastructure and the operating systems that we have. So that continues to be core services. On a regular basis, we're employing people to maintain, repair. The Development Authority is now 75 plus employees, round numbers. A lot of that has come in the last 5 or 6 years, as we have developed a business model, if you will, working with municipalities. I think I'm old enough to remember, I know Don is, when you go back to the origins of the Development Authority, the principal concern was that some super government was being created that was going to take over everything. And there were bumps in the roads during the initial decade or two. We have focused very much in my tenure on partnerships. We now have in excess of 103 municipal contracts. So I think that speaks to the partnerships that we have developed during that time frame, and recognize the authority does not have the ability to impose its will on anybody. All of our business arrangements are by mutual agreed to contracts. So if you don't want to do business with the Development Authority, you don't have to. If you want to do business with us, we sit down and negotiate mutual terms and agreements whereby we provide services that you believe you can afford, and usually it's a multi-year agreement so that we can discount some of the investments we're making on your behalf. That model has worked exceedingly well. And of course, in the last decade, you've seen us move into new arenas in terms of moving into GIS services, and lately we're spending a lot of time on government dissolution and consolidation. Requested of us by municipal partners. Declining the requests we're receiving from outside the region. There's a great deal of interest by virtue of the authority's involvement in the Regional Economic Development Council for the last 5 years. They see us, they see what our capabilities are. They've encountered our programs because we're administering a number of them on behalf of the state on a regional basis, and they all want us to come visit them and do some work for them. Now, our board uses its judgment in doing those things. It has a number of rules that it applies internally before we make those decisions. The first of which is their benefit to the Tri-County region. And if there's not, then we're not involved. But if there is benefit to us, and in many times that benefit is in simply spreading the cost so that our residents, if you will, of that Tri-County region benefit from the services that we're selling elsewhere. And then it becomes a question of, is it manageable? You know, doing work in Essex County is a little difficult on occasion. So that's pretty much limited to telecom, because we can do a lot of that electronically. But, you know, of late, there's been a great deal of activity and interest in Franklin County. They're kind of on, you know, our eastern side, but they're affiliated with everything on eastern New York, or on our western side of that state. And as a result, they really want to deal with us much more than they do the regions that they're in. Part of that is attributable to the original deployment of telecom. The authority deployed it in the 3 counties here, and it never really got deployed on the eastern side. They had a like organization attempting to do it. It was unsuccessful. Franklin County Legislature came to us and said, will you guys connect us? It's going to take them forever to get over to this side. You guys are right next door in St. Lawrence County. We did, and it has worked out to everybody's advantage. It was the anchor of what is now a, correct me, Rich, 112 unit telemedicine network of hospitals and healthcare providers, which was the original Fort Drum network on this side that we built, and then at the request of Congressman Owens, we built the Action Network on the eastern side of the Adirondacks, and now put a switch in place so that they're both linked, and we have in excess of 100 healthcare units that are using our network on a daily basis to transmit information, diagnoses, etc. All of which provides benefit to our region, and that's the whole purpose of our existence, to address those common interests. Equally important are some of the things we've not done. Our legislation gives us the same powers the IDA has. We have IDA powers, as it's referred to. We have exercised that but once in 30 years, and that was at the request of St. Lawrence County IDA to handle a major financing for St. Lawrence University. Other than that, we've not used that authority. It was a conscious decision made back really in the beginning. The authority was created in '86. '88, it developed its first regional master plan, which is some interesting reading. But 30 years ago, it recommended that the authority create a local development corporation. Our board consciously decided that that was duplication. We had 3 counties. They all had their own economic development structures, and so consciously we chose not to replicate that. And some of you may recall at the time that that was one element of the hysteria of super agency going to take everything over, and particularly some Jefferson supervisors who were on the IDA at the time were concerned. It never happened. It's not the intent. Since then, we have collectively agreed to do regional marketing from the standpoint of drum country business. It was advanced by the Fort Drum Regional Liaison Organization originally. They looked for someone to take it over. The authority agreed to do that. So one of Michelle's tasks is to coordinate the activity of drum country with the 3 IDAs. We all contribute financing, as does National Grid. And that has worked well. It's a good vehicle for regional marketing and coordination. I would encourage the growth and expansion of that. Frankly, we all need to be putting in more money. We all need to be focusing on a more regional perspective. Any discussions in terms of economic development, particularly at the state level, is totally focused on a regional approach. You bring in, you've brought in, we've brought in, everybody brings in national speakers, the experts, because they're from out of town, but their common advice is you need a regional approach. First of all, none of us can afford to have St. Lawrence competing with Jefferson. We have common denominators between the three industries, three counties. We have common industries. So we need to be focusing on more of a regional perspective. And the only way you're going to do that is to start to put more funding in and provide that with more direction. So, there's the global picture. I'll let Michelle just touch base on some of the loan programs she has, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Jim. Excuse me. As Jim mentioned, I think that the partnerships are really key, because oftentimes, I'm a lender. I look to the IDAs. You guys get the projects. Oftentimes people will call me and say, well, what are the projects you're working on? I said, well, the IDAs are the ones that are really driving the projects. You guys are the first line of defense when it comes to people looking to locate or expand businesses in the counties. So from my perspective, I'm really your partner in lending. And there's a lot of opportunities, I think, especially with public funds, to be able to provide really good incentives to businesses right now, whether they're new or expanding within the county. Just at the authority itself, we administer a tourism fund. I know that IDAs typically don't lend to hotels and things of that nature, but again, we have a fund that can help with tourism, especially lodging. We have a value-added ag fund that can assist with agricultural type businesses. As Jim mentioned, the New York Power Authority money in the North Country Economic Development Fund. We use that regularly to leverage other funding sources like the IDA and LDCs to be able to provide packages to businesses, as well as we administer the North Country Alliance. So there's a well-rounded package of public loan funds. I think when people say, well, they're public money, I just say, listen, there's a lot of public money out there. And it's low interest right now. I guess that's the other thing. Partnering with banks, partnering with our other economic development agencies, businesses right now can get really good financing, long-term at good pricing, that hopefully should help them conserve some cash and grow their businesses. Again, mentioning Drum Country Business, I think that's a great partnership. I know Marshall sits in on some of those calls. It's an opportunity for all the IDAs to work together, to listen in on the calls, and we've only been doing this, hard to believe, for a little over a year. It takes time to build relationships with a lot of these companies, but they're calls with CEOs CEOs, CFOs, COOs that you otherwise wouldn't be having. And it just is a long-term relationship to get them aware of Northern New York State, so that when they are ready to expand, that they remember us. Now we have a list of direct contacts so that we can reach out to them and start looking to attract them to Northern New York State when they're ready to make the investment. Because I think anybody will tell you in economic development, it's like a dartboard. And you're kind of shooting darts when it's time for business to make that decision to locate, and you want to be on the radar. So that's where we're at with Drum Country Business, and I agree with Jim wholeheartedly. I think it's something that is worth considering expanding in terms of financial resources, because again, it's a really good initiative that has brought awareness to the three-county region for business development. Another program that we just started marketing is the Export-Import Bank. I think that's another opportunity for our partnerships with the IDAs, is to make the programs of the Export-Import Bank aware to businesses that export, because they have a lot of great programs. Insurance is one of them. So if you have a company that is looking to export and they have a purchaser in another country, an eligible other country, but they want to insure that so that they know that they'll get paid, the Export-Import Bank can provide services like that. As well as direct loans for working capital. So I think there's a lot of incentives and a lot of programs that are available for exporters. And if you have any, just have them give me a call, and we'll hook them up with the Export-Import Bank, and we'll be doing some workshops with Exxon. But again, I think that's another resource that we can work together to help promote. Because again, you guys deal with the businesses. We have the programs, and whatever we can do to work together to get that word out to the businesses, it's just more resources. And I think the last thing I would just point out is the collaborative nature of working together, especially with communities as well, because we talk often about businesses, but those businesses are communities, and you may have communities that need infrastructure or need some other additional assistance. And feel free to pick up the phone, and based upon our work with other communities, we may have an answer. We might be able to provide an answer or there might be a program out there. The tourism fund, the value added fund kind of came out of comments that said we need money for lodging. So they got together, the tourism committee of the regional council got together and said, okay, let's put this in. We administer the funds on a regional basis. But it's ideas like that if we see common issues, and as Jim mentioned, there are common issues in the 3 counties. If we hear about these common issues, then we can brainstorm, think outside of the box, and figure out ways to address some of those issues. So I think the collaborative nature of just working together and utilizing our mutual resources is a good thing that we can utilize to help some of these communities as well as the businesses that are in the communities.
We have a big one right now, and I'm hoping that the authority can really help us out with is, we've got a couple good prospects for our airport park. And we need infrastructure. And I really think that it's time that we get together and get this done, because it'd be a really loss if we can get those put together as quick as possible. We've expended somewhere around $1 million to date, getting environmental stuff done, getting the land purchases and like that. I really think we could really circle the arms and it's basically the infrastructure. We need to take care of the sewer issue. We've got water there, so it's the sewer and gas and power. Correct, Dan?
Correct. And to Dave's point, it's time, and this is essentially what Jim and Michelle have been saying, it's time that we stop the combative relationships that sometimes had occurred over the last 50 years around here, where this is not fiefdoms, we're in this battle, if you will, to improve our economy, and we need all of the tools that we can bring to bear, and the Development Authority just has a number that we need to move closer to and try to use whenever possible. I would tell you that I've never found them unwilling to talk about some of the issues that we have to deal with. In fact, I hope the situation is reversed. I'm pretty sure it is. Michelle has an issue. She picks up the phone and says, "Hey, what's que pasa?" I would anecdotally would tell you, I go back far, that I remember back in the days of the Fort Drum Steering Council when the discussion about forming the Development Authority occurred, and it was then the discussion was, would there be a regional mechanism to deal with some of the infrastructure problems that the region had? And we had lots and lots of those infrastructure problems. And thus the Development Authority was formed, and I remember attending the first public hearing. I represented the Fort Drum Steering Council at that hearing, and there were 2 people in favor, at that moment anyway, of the regional landfill. And there were 500 and some odd people in the auditorium of the high school. And Jim Canick and I were the only 2 in the entire room who were in favor of this, or at least that appeared to be the case. And I thought to myself, my God, are they starting in a difficult position? Because people didn't understand what was being proposed, and the concepts were fairly new. But the point I make is that in those 30 years, or 30 plus years now, you guys have come a tremendous way and have filled in voids that existed for years and years. And when you look back, we didn't have zoning, we didn't have water pipes, we didn't have sewer, we didn't have landfills, we didn't have anything 30 plus years ago, and we've come a long way since. And I think it predicts what the future can be. We can continue to move along in that direction. So,
Jim, just for my information, if Tank were to get involved in something like this, do you guys own and operate the infrastructure, or do you charge a fee back, or do you just contribute money towards it? How does the agency work?
There are a number of different models that we've participated in, okay? In the case of the western, what we refer to as the Western Regional Water Line, runs from the Cape down to Glen Park. Coalition of towns and villages attempted to developed the project on their own, were unsuccessful, came to the authority and said, if you build it, we'll buy it. From that, we own the pipeline. We manage and handle the O&M on the pipeline. All 6 municipalities complain on a regular basis because they have competing interests. But in turn, it is held together and it has worked for 15+ years. We carry the loans, so we received, we put together an application, went to rural development, well, it's rural development now, but USDA rural funds anyway, and secured the financing for it. And they, on a monthly basis, pay us for what we refer to as the capital structure, and then the actual water itself. It's a 2-tier pricing. Best example I could give you is Brownville doesn't like the fact that they annually, or they on a regular basis have to pay. Don's nodding, he's probably gotten what they call a dank charge in Brownville. But last week when Brownville's wells went empty, we simply turned the water on. And that's what the fee's for. We have to have the capacity to turn that water on, to provide it to you, and all of the O&M that's involved in maintaining that system. So, yeah, I mean, it's basically a utility that we run. So nobody likes that, but they want to be able to flip the switch when they need to. So if you lived in Brownville, you probably wouldn't even notice the transition. Just eventually the water starts ramping up. So that's one model. Over in the Route 3 corridor, we run a sewer operation over there. They're all interconnected. Each one of those were individual municipal projects that we coordinated, assisting in the financing and the loans, and then we administer and manage the lines for them. So those are 2 different models. We're talking with folks down in South Jeff, looking to create some kind of a model down there. We're going to continue to have those conversations. The bottom line is we don't have any money to give to a project, okay? So what we do have is our bonding capability. So we can go out and bond the project if we need to. We can manage the finances for the entity, including the grants and loans. And knock on wood, we're very successful on the grant side of the agenda. Don made reference to Carrie Tuttle. Carrie's our Director of Engineering. Does a lot of sewer and water projects and has been very successful in capturing regional, state, and now national money in terms of funding those projects. So typically what happens, we begin working with some municipalities. They conceptually have an idea of what they want. So in this case, you have the airport. I'm assuming you're going to connect to Hounsfield. So, we would start working with that municipality and the airport, start to put together a financing package, and if successful, then we advance the project. That's typically the model and the way it works. Now, frankly, it's part of our business model too. I'll be honest about it. That embeds us in the organization because, the town and or village board get to know Carrie over usually a period of 18 months to 2 years. These things don't happen quickly. And working together, they then retain us to oversee their project. Now, we don't do the engineering. We intentionally do not do design build work. It's a conscious position from our board that we're not looking to directly compete with the private sector. So we've carved out a role for ourselves that we describe as project management. And so basically at obviously lower rates than an engineering firm would charge, and that's what makes us affordable. We work with the municipality to oversee the engineering work being done on behalf of that municipality. Because, frankly, most of the boards are 5 good-intentioned people, generally have been drafted to serve on a town or village board, and they're not short of maybe somebody having some engineering experience, they're not gonna bring that to it. So that becomes our role to keep everybody honest and make sure they get their value added, if you will. And, you know, that starts right from the beginning. Preparing an RFP to solicit engineering firms, and when we've done that, we generally end up with 5 or 6 proposals. And we don't make the choice, the municipality does. But we work on their behalf to ensure that they do have choices, and therefore can maximize how their money works. So any of those models work, where we own it, where we manage it. What we don't do, because we don't have it, is just say, here's $1 million, go invest it. You know, we've done small planning projects. We gave $25,000 to the town consortium down South Jeff. Worked with Dave Kellogg to serve as the lead agency, and so we gave them some planning money to move that forward. We have some of that available, but that's, you know, $25,000 increments. It's not big money, but it helps the planning process, and as a result, they have some things on paper, and, you know, we have to decide how much those municipalities want to commit. You know, I can sell the bonds, that's easy, and we'll get good rates, but you have to commit your ratepayers to pay us back, you know, the bonds and as well as the O&M. And that gets into the current battles of, well, I've been a ratepayer on a water line for 20 years. I don't need to pay for this new stuff. So, you know, everybody in the existing water district or sewer district wants to protect themselves because they're perfectly happy. It's those new guys that need all this stuff. Well, in truth and in fact, it doesn't work that way. It's one hydrologic system, it's one network, and you need to share the cost or you can't build it. But they haven't gotten over that hurdle yet. Long explanation, but those are the things that we do. So in this case, I would start with, frankly, and maybe you have, a CFA application, because you have prospective investors at the park. Then you have the capital leverage that the state is looking for in terms of growing private dollars being invested in the state. And that's the whole premise behind the Regional Economic Development Council, is to solicit projects, but the state generally doesn't want to do more than 20%. So they want a minimum leverage of 5 to 1. You know, the region has done reasonably well because they have so many programs stuck into the CFA process, but the reality is you really need private sector money to drive this, and that has always been a deficiency in the region. So that's where I would start, and then, you know, if that initial funding arrived to do some planning, design, etc., then we can move forward and then turn around and apply to the feds, because the federal money can also leverage state dollars, move that the next step forward, and ultimately start putting in some infrastructure under a contractual long-term agreement. And most of them are long-term. I mean, you know,
So it sounds like you gotta have a commitment by these potential people before funding could be available for infrastructure?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
What's your view on the microgrid concept of how strong is it gonna come at us in the future? And
Well,
how much attention should we be paying to that?
we're in a microgrid project that's kind of morphed into more than what we thought it would be, because the state is still a moving target in terms of their expectations. We were working on the Krogan Dam redevelopment with the village of Krogan in Lewis County. In our wisdom, we thought that a good way to get some of that engineering work paid for, since neither party has any money, was to apply to the microgrid program, which at the time was looking to provide power to essential services. So, you know, we had identified about 7 in the immediate Krogan area, put in the application, and it popped out a winner. And so we've been moving forward on that, but in the meantime, it's now morphed into a broader program where they're looking to, provide power to the entire area, not just the 7 priorities, but to the entire residential base. And frankly, I don't see us wanting to do that. We're not interested in being a power company. So that's the first problem. The second problem is I don't know how committed the state is to it, because recognize it's diametrically opposed to the interests of the existing utilities. And not that you don't want to keep them competitive and all of that, but you're taking away market share, you're taking away revenues. How is that a successful business model to have your anchor utilities be available to provide you core energy? Because a lot of the microgrids are on the whole premise of renewable power, which is all good, but very little of it's baseload. As a result, you have seen the outcome of this process Monday when the Public Service Commission included the nuclear plants in their clean energy portfolio. You can have a long debate whether nuclear is clean energy or not, but the reality is it doesn't have the carbon footprint of coal, so it's better than that. And you're going to have 2, if not 3 plants close in New York State with job losses of probably 1,500 per site and significant income, as well as tax base, unless somebody stepped in. So the state used the clean energy vehicle as the means of doing that. Now, the estimate is all residents will pay $2 more a month. I haven't heard anybody give the business estimates as to what, but I can assure you it'll be significantly more than $2 a month. So, that's the trade-off. Having done that and committed what are estimated to be billions of dollars, in that effort, what's left to maintain some of this other stuff? I don't know. And I haven't seen anybody speak to that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Incidentally, Jim's earlier comment about the water line, the Western Regional Water Line, no pun intended, but at the other end of the pipeline, you begin to see the advantage in a very physical and personal way. I spent 20 years on the Brownville Fire Department and lived in Brownville for years, and we would plan a strategy knowing every summer the wells would go dry. And so we had to set up tanker runs amongst the villages to try to keep the village water tower full, or reasonably full of water. And we prayed every day that there wasn't a major fire in the village, because we wouldn't have the capacity, under the certain circumstances, a dry season like this one, we'd be in big trouble. Well, now Brownville, for all those who found issues with that, have an adequate supply of water. And if a fire occurred, God forbid, at least they would have the capacity to try to deal with that. So at the other end of the pipeline, again, no pun intended, we see the very important advantage of having this kind of an effort. So
A lot of this is historical. You may remember the names of Otis Radley and Gene Parker, 2 stalwarts on the Board of Supervisors, who were leading advocates for Fort Drum and all of that. In those days, they wanted to develop a countywide water district. There's actually a plan sitting on the shelf that would do that. That was unsuccessful because of the intramural squabbling among the municipalities. And ultimately, the piece that survived was the piece that had Otis on one end and Gene on the other end, and runs from Cape Vincent to Brownville.
absolutely.
So that was their foresight on behalf of their communities. Now, subsequent to that, it started to unravel a little bit, because the vision was that the regional line would service any growth and development, and therefore pricing would come down. Well, unfortunately, the municipalities started developing their own districts, some of which they now feed with their own sources rather than the regional water line. So as a result, you don't have the growth that you're looking for, and some of the biggest complainers are the ones who've developed 4 and 5 water districts off the line. You're shooting yourself in the foot, fellas, but.
Gene, by the way, was our county resident expert on brown bass. Jim will remember this. We used to, every time we had an issue, tried to develop something, we ran headlong into the brown bat issue. And Gene was also in the fire department for years. And every time we got together, the subject of bats came up, and Gene would get right up on the table and start pounding his chest. But that's a whole other story. But
So a lot of these contracts, being 30 years into it, a lot of these contracts were written for infrastructure for, say, 15 or 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Once those are
The
amortized,
regional water line's 30 years.
is it 30?
And the feds will give you that kind of term, and low interest too.
Yeah.
Because they know that once you put the pipe in the ground, now, they are much more aggressive than they used to be about asset management. Because unfortunately, we've had a lot of municipalities who have made the initial investment in sewer or water plants with, then turned around and for budgetary reasons chose not to put in the preventative maintenance that they should have. So necessary investments, give us an asset management plan before we'll even start talking to you about financing. So you can still get it, it's just a different manner in getting it. From our perspective, it's another business area for us. We do asset management planning, a number of municipalities, so that they can get financed. But yes, 25, 30 years is not uncommon.
So some of these projects have amortized themselves out, in which case, under the contractual terms, there's a real cost savings. In other words, like on some of these people's water bills, they're no longer paying for infrastructure, it's just usage and maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you usually have some kind of reinvestment, I think, in terms of the maintenance. So I mean, at the end of a term, you usually have to go back out and borrow more money in order to make some more significant
Upgrades.
upgrades. Yeah, I mean, after 30 years, it's like any of the housing projects that we have in our portfolio. The first housing projects had the tax credit projects had 15 years affordability, and then most of them had 20-year loans. Once that 15 years came out, guess what? They needed new roofs, they needed new appliances, they needed new siding. So we typically went in and let them take out some of the equity, put it back into the property, and then turned out their loans longer. So that's what you see with some of the projects around Fort Drum, like the Ledges, Wood Creek, where you had new owners come in, purchased out the property when the tax credits were over, and then reinvested back in those properties. And they have good occupancy rates right now because they did reinvest in the properties, and then we just turned out the loans for a longer term. I think it's similar in infrastructure as well, as you just have to make some of that reinvestment. So I don't know if necessarily their bills have a significant reduction. It's just that you have to go back and reinvest in that.
O&M reserves are part of the.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, which typically they don't do sometimes unless required to by the financing.
That's part of the problem.
The other side of the coin is a lot of, particularly in water and sewer, a lot of the requirements are regulatory. So what was, the standard when you built in 1960 is no longer the standard, and you have to bring it into compliance. So it's a whole another layer. I see some business guys nodding knowingly. That's what you encounter too.
What can you tell us about the Mercy-Seg redevelopment?
It's moving forward. The city has, approved the plan. Well, no, the city planning board has approved the plan and has recommended it to the city council, which I guess is taking it up sometime in August, as I understand it. So once the city council approves the site plan, which I'm assuming they will, because they certainly have had input up to this point, and then issue the permits, it's our understanding construction will begin. they've
So
worked
they're
out their,
Their financing's in place and
yeah, yeah,
nice.
Construction this year?
yeah,
Presumably.
that's their plan this fall. As I understand it, they have things worked out with the church. So there's some land swapping going on there that is to everyone's mutual advantage. So we look forward to it coming out of the ground. It's, I mean, basically, it's gonna be a huge anchor on downtown. And that, you know, I mean, that was the pitch to the state at the time, that, look, we have this corridor that we think has a great deal of potential, basically running from Core to the Lincoln Building. And both projects are moving forward. So, you know, it's a combination of services and residential, because that's what's occurring in urban environments now, whether we want to call Watertown urban or not. The truth is, it is in that category, and very number of people want to live in a downtown area with access to services and whatnot. So, you know, as a rural area, we're used to going out. Now it's going the other direction, and we need to think accordingly.
That could have been a blunder on the city for a long time, just sitting there the way it was. That's good.
Yeah, it would have been an expensive problem for them, yes.
That's for sure. Thank you. Thanks for coming over.
More than glad to.
As always, look forward to.
What would you have us do?
Well, I'd have Michelle bring the donuts next time, but, you know, I mean, that's my own personal observation.
I'll make a mental note.
John Dolo always used to say, you can tell the value of a committee by the snacks that they put out.
Yeah, that's right. No, you know, you guys.
One of many things John said.
One of many. You guys have been tremendous, and I would only say to you that I think this board understands the value that you bring to the community and wants to be, wherever we can, a part of that. As a partner, I think maybe we've tried to demonstrate that, but if we haven't, for goodness sakes, let us know. If you see things that we should be doing that we aren't, as a county agency, for heaven's sakes, you know, let us know. We'll try to pitch in. We can't do this alone. No agency, I don't care how good or bad they are, can do this job of development of the community alone. New York State has its own competitive issues we have to overcome, and we can do that, at least to some extent, so.
Yeah, and having said that, what amazes me, and it's a lesson in life, for me, is to see how, just in the last 2 weeks, we have included nuclear power as green energy. I mean,
Sure.
that is.
It's a wonderful thing, policy, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and that was a grassroots movement, right? Yeah, right. Just overnight, we wave a wand, and now nuclear is green energy.
They did
And
the
it
same
fits
thing
all
with
this new
hydro.
criteria. What a
And if you
company.
don't like the discussion, change it. It's always the rule.
Yeah,
And that's what
absolutely.
happened.
All goes on green.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Solved
Is there,
everybody's problem.
with regards to
I
the
don't know about
airport,
that.
which is kind of what this whole discussion about, is, does some action fall to one of the committees, or is it staff to kind of further the business plan and further, you know, what is it gonna cost to put the infrastructure in relative to what we might collect? At some point, clearly, you're trying to sell all the spots, generate jobs, but hopefully, in the end result, make some money for the overall transaction, or break even, or a small investment. It's all relative, but is there some action you want to put onto somebody? There was a few programs discussed and applications and things like
Yeah,
that.
I believe that
We're
staff is.
all well
So
underway.
staff is handling it, it's
Staff
not a
is
committee
working.
problem, it's a,
It's,
not
staff
problem,
is,
but
this has been
task.
an ongoing project for nearly 15 years now, so it has its fits and starts, but the past year, 2 years, we've accelerated greatly in terms of what we're trying to accomplish because of a number of reasons, which there's no point getting into now, but we do have a number of things going on, CFA applications and those kinds of things to try to further this. And I think Michelle and Jim would be aware of those, and if there that, I'll make sure that they are, but I'm pretty sure they are aware of all that. And we do have an issue, and I said to Chairman Dave that, looking ahead, we're going to have to make some serious additional investment in that project, and we're going to have to find different resources to be able to make that happen. So, as Dave, I think, said earlier, we've got $1 million in, damn near $1 million in just environmental issues and land acquisition, and $18,000 worth of grass seed, which I'm gonna go back out and tear up in a little while. So, a lot of issues we gotta deal with, but your point is well taken. It is underway. At some point in time, we'll give you a complete brief as to where we are.
And we have, the one prospect we have is very, very good prospect, and they are world renowned, and I would hate to lose them. So, staff continues to work on it, and that assures me it's, anytime that he needs to bring something to the committee or bring something to the board, he'll be doing that, so we can hopefully continue to.
Well, certainly if it sweetens the pot, the county is at your disposal, right? As you just had discussed, we're
Well-
broader than the IDA, is I guess
Oh,
all I'm
much,
getting at.
much,
and
much,
I'm
much better than, you know, just, you can't do this by yourself. It's just no way. Everybody has to buy into the notion that it will be of great benefit to our community, not only tomorrow, but 50 years down the road. And as Jim has pointed out, one of the things that we're trying to do, we step back and we look at the county and we say, what are the infrastructure needs and what is the value of those going forward? How does the water line, sewer line, if it's extended in this area, how does that impact our ability to market our community and bring in jobs, which is, you know, really what we're talking about. And so that's always a part of the grand plan as to how does this better fit? We're always working with the towns, the villages, and the Development Authority, and anybody else who's in this business to try to strengthen, you know, our infrastructure assets that we have. So.
Is the prospective developer main interest location, or is it proximity to supply chain, or combination?
It's the airport.
So, location.
Location and workforce, very important.
Location and resources available. And then obviously there's other that might be more comfortable because they're close to the tri-county supply chain, plus the location and resources.
What you discover when you do this job, and perhaps Jim and Michelle would agree, but almost every project really has to be looked at on its own individual merits because they come at it from a different perspective, and we have to be able to respond. If their concern is workforce, yes. If it's transportation assets, we have to, yes. We have, in other words, we have to supply the needs of the businesses we're trying to attract. And so what we try to do is we try to develop as many of those needs so we can find the niche for wherever these guys locate. Which is why we're delighted to see guys like Mark Purcell, who does private development, and we're working with him, as I'm sure Michelle and Jim are, on their park out near Route 81. He provides a different venue and a different set of accommodations, so we can accommodate somebody like, you know, Charlie Capur to build his dealership out there, so or the airport, something else.
So what you're saying then, this infrastructure would be useful to something other than just the airport?
Absolutely. The thing, John, is if we're smart about this, and we have talked, we formed very loose-knit group of Town of Watertown, Town of Hounsfield, Village of Dexter, Airport, County, IDA, very, very loose-knit, but we get together occasionally. We talk about development corridors, and as Jim just alluded to, we develop these corridors, and it may go from point A to point B, and you're trying to serve point B, but along its path creates this whole development corridor, and that's, you know, at least from my viewpoint, that's where you really win. You may serve the air park, and you may serve the airport, but you've created 10 miles or 5 miles of access to water, sewer, and the other infrastructure.
Thank you.
Very good. Once again, thanks guys for coming over,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Pretty bad when you make you bring your own coffee though, Jim.
Sure, stop every morning, you know?
Thanks very much. Michelle, thank you
Yes,
very
thank
much.
you very much.
Good to
Take
see you
care.
guys.
See ya.
Take care.
See you guys, thanks.
Bye.
Anything else for the LDC this morning?
Sure.
Have a
I'll
motion?
second it.
Second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, we stand adjourned. I will call the order